That when I was in Pocomoke, Bob Geppert was the dean here, and he brought in John Shelby Spong. And Bishop Spong, a true heretic, and of course heretic means one who chooses, and they choose usually their own way as opposed to the accepted institutional way. Bob brought John Shelby Spong, Bishop Spong, here. And at a convention of the whole diocese, I was then pretty strong in my evangelical faith, which I no longer carry. I left that, and that's a whole nother story. But in that day, I had the zealous evangelical spirit, and I stood up in front of all the convention to warn them about John Shelby Spong, that he was this genteel-looking grandfather, but he was a dangerous man to the faith and that kind of thing. And lo and behold, 3 months later, I am in Ocean City on vacation. It's a rainy day, we're off the beach, in a bookstore, the kids are running around, and on the way out the door, in a big pile of books that might as well have been marked destined for the fire, $1.99. On the top was one of his books. And I looked at it, and a little voice said, "You really would be embarrassed after having stood up and spoken against him if anyone ever asked you, had you read one of his books?" So I picked it up, and for $1.99, I bought it for insurance. Just in case someone asked me, I could proudly say I read it. 20 pages into that book, like the blinding light road experience of Paul, the scales dropped, and I was like, oh my God, this guy has been asking the questions I've been asking for years, but was afraid to answer. The long and short of it is, I made that jump back in Pocomoke and came up here to the very church that I'd spoken out against, home to a fair number of heretics, to be honest. This church is, in the best use of the word, this is a church that fits with me and I with it because few of us are that comfortable with the institution. I am always aware that the institution, the establishment of religion had a hand in the killing of Jesus. When I came to be dean of the cathedral, I moved further into the bowels next to the bishop. I am keenly aware that the scriptures speak of Jerusalem as the place where the prophets go to die and the Spirit lives out in the wilderness. That's a long way of saying, what did I bring to this work? I brought a whole new openness of faith because I had finally jumped the rock wall of the faith of my childhood. And I brought with it a keen awareness that on my very, very first sermon in that pulpit, the reading was of John the Baptist, and I said to them, I left Pocomoke City to come to Easton, and I have moved from the hinterland, the wilderness, into Jerusalem. One of the things I'm about to do, I've written up the description, but I just recently talked with a Presbyterian woman who is 3 or 4 years into a group in Michigan called the Nuns and Duns. And the nun, of course, is none of the above in the religious survey, a fast-growing group. They've been studying the nuns, N-O-N-E-S, for 6, 8, 10 years. The Duns are those that are done with church. And I am going to start a Nuns and Duns of Easton. And it will hopefully bring together people who would like to know someone inside that organization, institution, who has its own scars from time spent there, but who can still speak to its virtues. But then you've really got to ask, what if someone comes through the doors, what am I inviting them into? And for me, yesterday, I asked a group of people, what makes for a safe space? What makes for a safe space? And we talked about a safe space, a place where you're free to choose some of your own beliefs, where there's no coercion or force, where people don't try to rescue you, fix you, save you, where you don't feel like you have a bullseye on you. That's much harder than people think. But then the best part of this space, the reason we have removed the pews, the reason I'm going to lose parishioners and have lost them, and hope they won't go far so that they might come back, is that we're going to be doing this. Instead of you and I looking up that way to an authority figure, often looked to with answers, often doing things on our behalf, often not thinking us capable of doing it, I'm turning people one to another. I'm bringing myself down the 7 steps onto the same platform and ground. The words are now going to be set in the midst of us, because I don't think the words of Jesus belong to a professional group. You know, I preside over a space that more and more people drive by but don't stop. And the Episcopal Church is topped out at 3.2 million in the 60s, 50s. We're down to 1.6 million. This diocese and every other diocese of the 109 in this contiguous United States, from 209 to 219, this diocese lost 26.4%. And when we stand up at the altar and look out at folks, now looking out in a different way, we see the demographics, we see the age makeup, we know that the next 10 are likely to be the same. And it's sobering. And yet, we ring the bell and try to tell our story in some new ways. This coming Sunday will be the first on a Sunday morning. It's still not public worship. It's for members and their families, and you have to sign up. Only 10 people. This is the first Sunday in 54 weeks. And in that time, I've done a lot of thinking. I decided that with my last 8 to 10 years of ministry, I'm tired of being silent too often. I'm tired of being led by fear of who'll leave and what money they'll take. I'm tired of it. And then the George Floyd death, and I think it is fair to call it murder. I just don't know what else you call it. It was purposeful. It could have been avoided. That changed me. Well, you asked me, do I have hope? And there are days I feel hopeless. I can't deny that. There are days I feel hopeless. But then I look at my own life. I think each of us has to carry our own hope in our own story. If someone had told me at 19, after 5 years of daily drug use, one day you will be free of this monkey on your back. One day you will have self-respect again. One day you'll have a family. One day you'll have a job that you really love to do, and parts of it you would do for nothing. One day you'll be really happy. There have been times in all of our lives when if someone had whispered what was coming, we wouldn't have believed it. And so I think in some way, truly, almost anything is possible. This church can rebuild it can reframe the story, but it's going to have to let go of things that it thinks are precious. And the church that is quiet and silent and finds its security in money and power in the way the world defines it, if that church has to die, I'll help bury it.